I am joined by Ambassador Robert O'Brien, former National Security Advisor to former President Trump, also the special envoy on hostage affairs for former President Trump, and his buddy Neil Auerbach, who is the president of the Hudson Sustainable Group. They wrote a piece for Fox Business last week on energy, which I'm going to come to, but when we set this up, I did it originally to ask about hostages, and then in the interim, Mitt Romney announced he's not running for Senate. Robert O'Brien, your name is everywhere in connection with the Romney vacancy. I have not spoken with you about that on air since it came out. Question: are you going to run for Senate in Utah?
Well, listen, Hugh, thank you for having me and Neil on. I'm very humbled by the support from both in Utah and nationally for me to run for this seat, and it's a special seat. It'd be great to work with our great senior Senator Mike Lee, constitutional scholar and friend, and that seat was held by Orrin Hatch for almost 50 years, and I knew Orrin Hatch since the 1984 Republican convention in Dallas. And I was a young man as a pace at that convention, got to know Senator Hatch, and had the opportunity to come speak when I was National Security Advisor in Salt Lake at his foundation, and then held by Governor Romney, the GOP standard bearer, in 2012. So to be considered for that seat and have people urge me to run for it is very humbling, and I'm honored. But Wilmer and I have taken the time since Senator Romney retired or announced his retirement to prayerfully consider it. And we're new to Utah. We don't think it's the right time for a Senate race, and we want to focus on getting a Republican and hopefully President Trump elected in 2024 and take back the White House. So I'm going to pass on the Senate race. One of the great things about going to Utah, Hugh, is that there's a deep Republican bench, a lot of great state legislators, congressmen, former congressmen who could run for that seat and would be a terrific senator, and I look forward to supporting one of them in the election.
You know, you had Congressman Michael Waltz, Armed Services, Congressman Mike Gallagher, Armed Services, chairman of the Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, and many other people in the national security. Jim Banks is going to be the next senator from Indiana. Said, O'Brien, history calls, you need to step up. So what do you tell them?
Well, look, I tell them thank you, first of all, for their friendship and for their support. And then, again, just like neighbors and friends in Utah, I'm incredibly honored that they would think that I could fill that seat and do a good job. But what I'm going to tell them is I'm going to stay in the fight. I'm going to fight for a return to peace and strength policies for this country and for an American first foreign policy. And just like I did when I was in office as National Security Advisor, and I'll do it from the sidelines, and we'll stay in the fight, and I'll support them and their work in Congress. There are three great congressmen that you know.
So, okay, that's a hard no. Let me ask you about Jason Chaffetz. I have not talked to Jason. I haven't texted him. Is he going to run for this seat?
Well, I think Jason's preference was to run for governor of Utah after Spencer Cox finished his second term in 2028. But there are a lot of people who want Jason to leave his Fox perch, and I know everyone likes watching him on Fox, but I think there are a lot of people in Utah and around the country that would love to see Jason Chaffetz as our next senator. I have urged him to run and urge him to do so now on the air. And I'm going to hold off on endorsing anyone in the race until we find out if Jason's going to get it or not. But I think he'd be a terrific U.S. senator from Utah.
All right, I'm with you on that. So Jason, run. Now, Neil, I'm going to come to you, and I'll go back to O'Brien about hostages in a second, the ambassador and I. But I want to ask you, Neil, how did you get mobbed up with O'Brien? I mean, that's a very unfortunate turn of events for you to get to the Hudson Sustainable Group and marry your fortunes to Robert O'Brien.
I know. I'm still lamenting it, but it's actually been a real pleasure working with him and his team. My firm has a number of issues from time to time with clients and projects that involve national security matters, and he and his team are just terrific advisors.
So the op-ed has three ways that the GOP ought to talk about climate change and energy, and I think everyone needs to have this down. So I'm going to ask you, Neil, first, then I'm going to go back to Robert about the hostage disaster. Tell us what the key three platform points are for every Republican running on energy and climate change.
Absolutely. Well, just to preface it for 1 second, what we do need is an America First approach to rising CO2 emissions. It's hard to deny that rising CO2 emissions is causing global warming. It's also, I think, easy to understand that there's a risk associated with rising CO2 emissions. And so the issue that the right has had is that that the left in this country has used climate change as a Trojan horse for the woke agenda. And we need to separate out how to actually approach CO2 emissions, rising CO2 emissions in a responsible way from the agenda being pushed by the left, which is largely anti-human. So we take a completely different approach, an America First approach. We agree that we should be promoting low carbon energy, but not just renewables, in which I've been focusing on for the past over 20 years, but also nuclear. And that's also a major part of our platform. There's nothing, if we're serious about lowering rising CO2 emissions, then nuclear is a very clear imperative for this country and for the world. So number one, promote low carbon energy. Number two, right now, rare earth minerals are an essential part of the low carbon economy that's used in many industries. We process over 90% of rare earth minerals in China. We need to do that in the U.S. It's very similar to what we did in the CHIPS Act by making sure that we have semiconductor independence. We also need rare earth independence. We need to manufacture, we need to mine and manufacture rare earth minerals in the U.S. And the third thing that's really important, and I think the left gets this wrong, we do not have a climate crisis that the world is, we don't have an extinction level event. We have a problem that we need to address. Fossil fuels are here to stay. It is foolish to think that fossil fuels are going to be eliminated. There are hundreds of trillions of dollars of wealth tied up in fossil fuels. It is all over our economy, but we can extract it and distribute it in a much cleaner way. And so we need to basically clean up fossil fuel extraction.
Good 3 points. I wish every candidate memorized those. We'll come back to that. Ambassador O'Brien, I already made a little news. You're not running for Senate. You served as the president's special envoy for hostage affairs. You also served as national security advisor. I asked the former president last week, would he have trouble staffing his administration if he was reelected? He said, absolutely not. Would you go back in, Robert, either as a vice president, a secretary of state, a secretary of defense, an attorney general, a secretary of the energy? Big jobs, but would you go back?
Well, look, we had a great run while I was in, and I've got no ambition to go back, but I was taught by my dad, who was a Marine Corps officer growing up, that when the president asks you to do something, you salute and say, yes, sir. And so if the president asked me to come back to one of those positions, it's a sacrifice for your family, as you know, Hugh, but you salute and say yes, because America is the greatest country in the world. It gave me tremendous opportunities, and I would certainly serve if asked by the president to return.
Have you talked to him about it yet?
There are a lot of great people that would staff the Trump administration, people like John Radcliffe and Rick Grenell and Larry Kudlow and Bob Lighthizer. So there are a lot of really phenomenal people that would go back to the Trump administration. The idea that he wouldn't have a top team is ridiculous.
There are a lot of people. My computer's going off here in the background. It's the wonderful Larry Kudlow, but I still got to silence him. Mr. Ambassador, have you talked with the former president about an administration after an election? Not about the election, but about how to put it together yet?
You know, I haven't, but the president knows who his key team is, and I'm sure he'll make the phone calls and bring in great people if he's reelected, which I think is now looking more and more likely.
Okay, on the hostages, would you have recommended the president make the deal that Joe Biden made?
Well, first of all, let me tell you, I'm happy that the hostages are coming home, and some of those were held while I was there, and I didn't get them home, and I failed that task, and I wish they were home. We did get hostages home from Iran. We did it without paying ransom, and I think it's much better to not pay ransom because for two reasons, Hugh. First, when you pay ransom, especially when you pay $1 billion per hostage, you create a market and you encourage further hostage taking. And so the Iranians, the Russians, the Chinese, terrorist organizations are going to see that and think, hey, I want to make a quick billion. I'll just take an American hostage. So you transfer the pain and suffering that the families themselves of the current hostages are going through to future hostages. And that's a bad policy, and that's why we never paid ransom. President Trump would have never paid ransom. But number two, you have to say, what is the bad actor going to do with the money that they get? And in Iran's case, it's the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. They're going to use it for more death. They're going to build more drones to kill Ukrainians. They're going to pay terrorists to kill Israelis. They're going to give money to Hezbollah in Lebanon and Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq and kill our partners and allies in those countries. and they're going to continue to fund the Houthis in Yemen and kill soldiers from the UAE and Saudi, who are our partners. So the two questions are: do you create more hostage-taking opportunities? And the answer with this deal is yes. And do you cause more people to die? And the answer here is unfortunately yes as well. So this is a very bad deal. President Trump would have never done it. I would have never done it. But having said that, I am happy that Murad Tabaz and Siamak Namazi are coming home after many years of being held hostage by Iran. And I'm happy for their families. But very bad deal for America and very bad deal for future hostages.
Now, Neil, I want to go back to you on nuclear. On October 11th in Piketon, Ohio, the first nuclear uranium enrichment plant to begin production in the United States since 1954 is going to open, October 11th. So people are starting to wake up, but have they even gotten close to figuring out how much nuclear energy we need if we're going to actually go to EVs?
I don't think so. I think that that part of the problem that we have is a recognition that humans create an environmental footprint. We create waste. We are waste machines. And the question is, what is more important? Do we want to deal with the nuclear waste cycle, or do we want to deal with rising CO2 emissions? We're at a point here where we can actually produce nuclear energy safer than ever before. And so we do need more nuclear energy. I think markets need to make these decisions, not individuals, not policymakers. But if we were able to fast track permitting for more nuclear plants, there would be a lot more nuclear plants in the United States, and we would see lower carbon energy in the United States as well. That's clear.
And Robert, 30 seconds. Brule, Perry, great secretaries of energy. You guys moved it forward. Are you glad to see a high enriched uranium plant finally opening in the United States?
Absolutely. Look, one of the reasons that France wasn't at Russia's, subject to Russia's leverage and blackmail is because France has nuclear power and they didn't have to rely on the dirty Russian energy. And if we had nuclear power like France, we'd be more independent, we'd be safer, and the environment would be cleaner.
Robert O'Brien, Neil Auerbach, thank you. Great piece on energy independence. I hope all the Republican candidates, and I'm sorry to hear that, Robert, but we made a little news. Robert O'Brien is not running for Senate in Utah. Like me, he's now going to support Jason Chaffetz doing that. So, Jason, where are you?